Hello, my name is D3 Damage and Mo Mao, the goat of Open, bringing you a guide for Open Aquarius, the first dirt CM. Oh god. All right. So some of you might not be familiar with me. One, I'm really good at Open. I'm going to leave it at that. Why do I love Open so much? Well, because it leaves me plenty of time to fix my team trial issues. All right. I do not have the best cards in the world, and so I need extra time to be consistent in Class 6 for team trials. It's just the way of the world. We're playing a gotcha, okay? And frankly, Open lets me have that time. It is a lot easier to hit the time that I need for Open. And that might be important for you too soon. Hey, if you didn't know, Track Blazer is coming out very, very soon. And, uh, well, there's going to be a new Road to the Top coming out soon. All right. And it's going to be harder than ever to maintain Class 6. And if you didn't know, it's already quite difficult, right? Like, the current week right now for hitting retention line is over 600,000. Do you remember back before Unity Cup in URA finale where the current retention was 400K? Yeah, I do too. I miss those days. But we're long, long past those days. So since we're long, long past those days, you need to start preparing yourself for it. You need to spend extra time to invest into your team trials. And if you're going to be doing that, you need more free time. And frankly, graded does not give you that free time, right? Graded is really, really rough on your free time, in fact. All right? Especially if you're not a whale, and if you're not a support only free to play, right? Support only meaning you don't pull on Uma unless they're super meta, right? uh, you're gonna have a tough time building out your cards in graded and also trying to keep up with the team trials. Like, frankly, you're probably having a tough time now if you're trying to play graded. A lot of you who are playing graded are probably hopping in and out of class 5 and class 6 pretty consistently, versus me and my hyper ass going after open instead. Hey, check this out. For open, I had a 90% win rate in Sagittarius Cup with a first place finish in finale, which is routine, by the way. I do this most CMs with literally 2 runs. I had an air groove that was Ori Radiant Rock. I ran this Daiwa Scarlet. This Daiwa Scarlet was brand spanking new. And then, for out of boredom, I ran this goal sheet to see if I could get a long S turd fest. And frankly, I hit it, right? Which was fantastic. And I ruined a lot of people's day by being really good at open with, again, 2 runs, okay? Like, you need to understand how easy it is to run open. And let's talk a little briefly about why. If you want a really extended version of this, you can read a little bit more, or hey, you can go watch my other videos. I'll figure out how to link those somewhere. But in the meantime, the big things that you need to remember if you don't take anything else away from this list is that the big one here is that there's no cap on graded, okay? Graded, full power, full send all the time, okay? No other option, yeah? It's just gonna be that way. There can always be better. You can always have more stats. You can always have better skills. You can always have better combinations of skills. And because there is no limit on graded, it's just gonna get worse with time. Especially with Track Blazer coming out, the ceiling is only gonna get higher. Versus open. In open, there's a hard cap. Because there is a hard cap, you can only get so strong, right? You don't really get much better than like this 8,192 over here. Okay, it's gonna be kind of tough. Because you can only get so strong, you can have a pretty high confidence that even against something like my Daiwa here, who was explosively powerful, you can probably beat her a good chunk of the time just off of random luck. It's gonna happen, all right? And it did happen. I did lose races that CM, you know? And I won't be the only one. Now, I know this can be overwhelming, especially for people who have never done open before. So I want to help you. I want to help you overcome the fear of the calculator and understand why, yes, it is fairly simple to run open. It's not that scary, and I want to help. Now, I need to be very, very clear. Uh, a lot of stuff just doesn't change. You don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be scared. A lot of stuff stays the same, right? Like, it's still Aquarius Cup. It's still a Tokyo Dirt. It's still 1600 Mile. Like, all of that stuff that you've heard from every other graded source still applies. One caveat I will have, though, is that you do need to be a little more dialed in on testing your UMA. Do make a habit out of going into February stakes or whatever the current CM is, and trying out your UMA to a certain degree as a person who is running open a big chunk of the time. you are going to run into this problem where you have to experiment because no one actually knows the best possible answer, right? Part of this is because we don't have a very large pool of content creators who routinely share what happens down in open, so it's very difficult to get accurate data on what's actually happening, right? And on top of that, the people in graded who could easily give us that information routinely just don't. Okay? So because of the lack of information and transparency, you're gonna have to do a lot of experimentation yourself. But I do want to help you out with some of that by helping you curb out don't use anything on the right side of this list. It's not because they're weak. In fact, counter argument, many of these are some of the strongest Uma in the game on the right side if you can get them to work. If. Again, I'm gonna make that sure I say it for the people in the back. If you can make them work. I say if because it's a dirt CM, y'all. Do you see how few Uma have dirt B or better? There are literally 9 of them. And it don't get much better. There's like 5 more Uma that you can realistically run, and there's a bunch of other people that just happen to show up some of the time. All right. Now, I need to be clear, this is not a tier list, all right? I'm not telling you what's the best of the best or what's the worst. I'm just need to make it clear that, like, I want to give you tools. I want to help you understand what you can do to make what you have work for you. Because that's what a lot of open is. A lot of what open is figuring out what tools you have in your toolbox. So I will talk about what the best in slot mamas are, where to get your greens, because greens are super duper important in open, where you can get your skills for dirt and mile, etc., what a reasonable base stat line and points value is, a demonstration of what that stat line can look like, and helping y'all explore the tug of war that is the stat versus skill question in Open Uma. Then we're going to talk about the generally I have a list of Umas, so like not the highest power level possible, but who can run the CM without you tearing your hair out, plus some weird nonsense, and open myself up for questions for later, alright? So, first and foremost, who are the best in slot mamas? Without a question, is Midra Orion, Madazensky, regular Madazensky, and Saiyan. Why? Well, because they have something that's very special for the CM. They have 20% acceleration uniques that are, well, functional. uh, this is a very short list. There are other acceleration uniques like Major Odober. Major Odober's acceleration is very inconsistent, and I wouldn't expect it to work most of the time, right? And she's not the only one. We'll talk about the one other like very important exception later. Uh, but Monozinski's works for every late surger and end closer. Major Orion's also works for every late surger and end closer. And then Sand Sky helps all of your frontrunners be a lot more consistent. And you might go, well, why is 20% such a big deal? Well, gold accelerations are pretty rare this CM. It's going to be kind of tough to get them, frankly, at all, right? And so, routinely, 20% is just the best number that you're going to get for your points value. Points value is something we're going to return to over and over and over again, but take it for granted that the more efficient you can be with your costs, the better your UMA is. A lot of open is about being efficient, and it turns out 180 points for a 20% acceleration is the most efficient acceleration per point that you can get. And that makes these 3 the, generally speaking, goated mamas of open. There are other times where other mamas are also quite strong. Notably, normally, uh, Taiki Shuttle would be on this list. Now she's not on this list. She is not on the goated mamas list for this Aquarius step because, unfortunately, her base duration is just a little bit too short, and it's a little bit too tough to get her acceleration to work. Now, if you are a late surger or pace chaser, it is possible, technically, but I wouldn't bet on it. All right, you're kind of setting yourself up for a much harder proc window. Like if you think about Redshift from Modazensty, right? Like Redshift from Modazensty procs a good chunk of the time because you just need to be in first through fifth. That's a really wide activation window for some time on the final corner or later. That means starting on that final corner marker over there, you can absolutely slam home, and anywhere in here you could get a proc rate, and anywhere after right here is an excellent proc rate for the start of the late race, right? Versus shooting for victory, it just procs too soon, unfortunately, right? And because it procs too soon, the only one that can use shooting for victory effectively is Taiki Shuttle herself. Because for her, it has a 4-second base duration, which it turns out is enough time for her to proc sometimes into the late race and at least get some value most of the time. But for everyone else, don't bother. Now, what about Velocity Inheritance? They're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They're cheap for what they do. right? A lot of them are 180 points for a 25% speed boost, like Behold Thy Emperor's Divine Might, which would normally cost you 288 points or more, right? Or more being like things like Professor of Curvature, which is a 500 point skill for only a 35% speed bonus. Now, is that to mean that these are bad? No, quite the opposite. They're still good, but many of the inherited skills tend to be a lot cheaper. And because they're a lot cheaper, they're more efficient. And again, efficiency wins games in open. So keep in mind, no velocity inheritance skill is uber important in the same way that the acceleration inheritance are uber important. Ah, and I should probably mention the hybrid ults like El Condor Pasa or Dire Scarlet's, Resplendent Red Ace. Unfortunately, those only have a 10% increase in velocity and acceleration when you inherit them. That tends to mean that it's not enough acceleration to outcompete, well, the actually powerful ones, like Redshift, like Shooting for Victory, sorry, like Redshift, like Let's Pump Some Iron, like Alien Steaming, right? So because those three are so much better, you probably don't want to take them. Although you could, it's nothing stopping you. Speaking of efficiency, greens. I mentioned this already before, but the really, like, Open loves greens, okay? Open really, really loves green stills. Why? Well, because starting at around 500 points, greens start to become more efficient than the raw stat equivalent, right? So, for example, if you go from 900 speed to 960, that is a score difference of about, like just shy of 200, okay? Right? It's pretty significant. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it turns out left-handed is just cheaper than that most of the time. All right, by a really good margin. So most of the time, you rather just have left-handed. That's just the way that it works out. Okay. And so because the it's just that much cheaper, that little bit of efficiency means you can squeeze in some extra stats, or it could be an extra skill that you squeeze in, and every bit of stuff that you can squeeze onto that 8,200 is goaded. Uh, and again, just for a quick demonstration of why this is so important, all right, you can glance at my little chart here and see, oh, from 1000 to 1060, that's a 300 point gap. From 1040 to 1200, that is a 400 point gap. And even at 500, from 500 to 560, that's still a 2 point improvement on just doing left handed. All right, this means anytime your stats go above 500, you probably want to strongly consider getting a green instead, or in addition to having that high stat. Now, let's go over the ones that are like by most importance. By and large, the most important one that you can get is left-handed. There's a couple reasons why. One, left-handed is a very flexible boost. Okay, in a lot of CMs, about half of them, it turns out, they're left-handed tracks. Wow, who could have imagined half the tracks are left-handed instead of right-handed? Whoa, crazy. So because left-handed is extremely flexible, that's part of how you can get stuff that to happen where you just don't need to remake everyone for every CM. Things like left-handed that are very flexible and open to multiple CMs let you use something in multiple CMs. So you can save yourself a little bit of heartache, which is quite nice. The other trick, though, is that left-handed also comes on some very powerful cards for open. Very notably, the Silent Suzuka cards. Silent Suzuka, it turns out, is a great frontrunner card, and in particular, she can also get you frontrunner savvy, which means that because of that, she's a double green card. Double green cards are goaded, especially for your frontrunners. And Suzuka being both a left-handed and a left-handed source, a speed source, and a frontrunner savvy source makes her incredible for the CM. I highly recommend borrowing or using Silent Suzuka if you have one. Hey, didn't you get a free to play version of her that you can max out to level 50 for free without spending a single dime? Hmm. Hmm. Speaking of not spending a single dime, firm conditions. Uh, there are a lot of really good ways to get firm conditions this CM. Right? There's multiple sources of winning ticket, multiple Nishino flowers. In particular, we have a Nishino flower power, Nishino flower speed, and a Nishino flower wit card, so you can get whatever flavor of Nishino flower that you need for your purposes, okay, to hit the stat line that you want. You can also grab King Kalo, Meisho Doto, Rice Shower. Like, there's so many good sources for it. And because there's so many great ways to get firm conditions onto your Uma, like, it's really tough to recommend whatever one over the other. Just have do whatever you vibe with. Like, do who you need to do, okay? Like, whatever source of first edition works out for the stat line that you want, that's the one that you take, and that's the one that's good for you. Oh, and of course, consider what other skills are on the card. For example, Right Shower comes with firm conditions, but also has Highlander on here. We're going to talk about Highlander later. And Winning Ticket is a very, very good late searcher card that just happens to have a lot of late searcher skills baked into her kit, which is quite nice. Now, we're going to start going into the lower priority greens, which is Winter Runner. Now, the reason Winter Runner is a little bit lower priority is because, well, you can't reuse it, okay? That being said, it's still a speed skill. It's still a speed green. Speed greens are always the best greens, and so that means that sometimes you just get to cycle this in, and it's gonna feel great. You're gonna love being able to do that, and that means you love, 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 love Yukino Bijin because she's gonna be your primary source of shareable Winter Runner. Now, I will also say there is another card that probably flew under people's radar called Inari 1. Inari 1 is a very good dirt card that also happens to give Winter Runner and Tail Held High. Now, unfortunately, you probably missed on this card. It wasn't really talked up or hyped by the graded CM community, so you probably just missed it. But if you happen to have it, hey, you have a good open card, it turns out. Now, let's talk about one of those ones that are a little bit lower priority. Tokyo Racecourse. Tokyo Racecourse is unique to vodka, more or less. Vodka is your only source of getting Tokyo Racecourse, and it turns out this CM, you really don't need that much stamina to consistently win. 500 is already plenty. And you might remember from our previous slides that 500 to 560 is the literal breakpoint. Going from 500 to 560 is the literal point where doubling up on a green is no longer more efficient. So since you only really need about 500 stamina on most positionals that aren't pace chasers, a lot of the time you just don't need Tokyo Racecourse because it's just no longer efficient compared to just getting the raw stat. That being said, there is still a good argument that if you want to, you can. Especially if you're a front runner or a pace chaser. Front runners, of course, love every green that they can get. Every green that a front runner gets helps them out tremendously by helping them proc for groundwork. And then for pace chasers, they just want more stamina. And so that 2 point efficiency might net you an extra skill or an extra stat line down the line. And because pace chasers just spend more stamina, hey, it could be worth it. For that same vein, we're looking at standard distance, right? For really, okay, realistically, you're probably getting this off of Nishino Flower, okay? You could get it off of El Condor Pasa, and we'll talk more about that in literally one more slide. But it's probably Nisho Flower, because Nisho Flower also happens to do other helpful things. She gives you straightaway acceleration, which is actually quite helpful for your pace chasers and front runners, right? She also happens to give you a couple of neat, like, velocity skills, which are quite handy. So, like, just take Nisho Flower. She'll help you out quite tremendously sometimes. Now, okay, Guts. We talked about the worst green for most characters, Sunny Days. I don't recommend this for most Uma. If you happen to need a third green for groundwork, then yes, absolutely, take Sunny Days. However, the problem is that most Uma in open don't have a lot of guts, unless you're specifically going for a guts maxing build, right? In a guts maxing build, absolutely, take Sunny Days. It's quite good, right? In a guts maxing build, you are scamming out on stamina, so why not? And in that instance, El Contrapasa is your goat. You're going to love having both standard distance and Sunny Days. It's gonna go great. It's gonna be great together. However, for most Uma, going from 300 to 340 or 360 is actually quite point inefficient. You'd rather just have the stat, right? And so Sunny Days is the one exception where I don't really recommend it at all unless you specifically can only get it for some reason on your front runners. That's really the only scenario. Okay. Or your gut maxing. That's it. Yeah, let's talk about dirt skills. There aren't a lot of dirt skills in the game. In fact, there are two that you can actually use from a card. Now, there are Uma that have dirt-specific skills that get their own version, or even the gold versions of those skills. Smart Falcon stands out. However, that's not most Uma. Most of you probably don't have Smart Falcon. And if you do have Smart Falcon, you probably don't have Agnes Digital. So you probably don't have both, right? So that means you're going to need to track down the skill. The best way to get it? Smart Falcon's card. And by best, I mean only. It's the only way to get it. However, there is a cool trick that Smart Falcon does do for front runners in particular. She's also a very, very high likelihood of groundwork off of her card. And again, you're in open. Because you're in open, you don't need ideal stats. In graded, you probably only ever use this for parents because in graded, you can't afford to be running inefficient cards or cards that just don't give very good stats. And unfortunately, Smart Falcon does not give great stats. But hey, you're in open now, son. So in open, it turns out her stat growth is just fine. You're not trying to get over super explosive stats anyway, so who cares? So she's also a power card. She'll help you hit your stamina growth that you need because you just don't need a ton. So she'll help you hit that little eeky beaky bit that you need. And she gives frontrunner savvy, which makes frontrunners even happier. So frankly, if you're running a frontrunner, just borrow this card. This is a very high priority borrow if you don't own it. If you do own it, screw you. I'm jealous. I missed when I rolled for it. Now, Forward March. This is really only on Inari 1. Inari 1 is a very interesting card because it has one particular quirk. I don't quite know how expensive Forward March is. I know it's somewhere between 129 to 143 because that's just how these types of cards work. Uh, when you have the proper affinity and you grab that type of card that gives you acceleration, it's quite good. Now, Forward March is very notable because it is a 20% acceleration. And if you know from our conversation earlier with our goaded open mamas, you know 20% acceleration is actually extremely points efficient, especially for being under 140 points. That's even cheaper than any other possible mama you could get it from. That's basically always cheaper than 180. Duh. So, frankly, I actually think Inari 1 might be a sleeper agent that everyone missed out on because we were told not to pull on her because she's not that great, quote unquote. So if you happen to have an RE1 and you were sad about it before, congratulations, you actually have one of the goaded cards for this particular CM. Alright, so congratulations. Because not only does she have Forward March, which is probably one of the best accelerations that you can possibly hit, she also has Winter Runner and Tail Held High on her, which are some of the real high priority skill cards. So if you have an RE1, I'm officially jealous. Congratulations, it was good shit. I did not look ahead, so this is my fault for not having this card. Now for other funny things that happen. Highlander. Highlander is the first card that is not a dirt card that we have to talk about for this particular CM because looky here, 533 meters and then 33 meters later an uphill. You know what's a cool uphill still? Highlander. You know what it does? 20% acceleration for 3 seconds. That's a very fat acceleration for only 217. So very reasonably competing with the 180 point to go to accelerated cards. Pretty much every pace chaser that you run into should have this, and if they don't, rough. Pretty much every front runner should have this. Frankly, I think everyone should have Highlander. I think there's not actually a reason to not take Highlander. Everyone should have it, right? This is kind of a ubiquitous skill in the same way that, like, if you see an end closer, straight away Spurt should be a ubiquitous skill. And that means the cards that give it to you and also help you with other things are quite strong. So, Rice Shower, very strong this CM because she gives you both firm conditions, which is one of our three goaded greens this CM, right? And she also gives you Highlander sometimes. It's gonna be quite cool. And on the same vein, Golshi might not be very real in graded, but she actually is pretty real in open. In open, it turns out she gives you plenty of the stats that you need in order to have her be effective. Even hitting her like 2 or 3 times is often enough to like get you the speed that you need over the course of your run. So she's actually quite fine. And especially if you're running like a front runner or an end closer, or really anyone who just wants Highlander or Umasan, like she's actually perfectly reasonable. Now, I will say she's definitely a goaded end closer card in particular because she also gives intense gaze and straightaway spurt. At the point where like half the hints are goaded hints for you, I think you can very reasonably take this card. You'll notice a theme, by the way. Hints in open are a lot stronger than hints in graded. We'll talk about why later, but for now, just remember, hints good. Hints good. Speaking of good hints, hit hello for the first time. It's Daitaku Helios. She is one of our GOAT open cards. Open has this weird thing where the meta is just completely different because you just don't have to hit the stat line. And this is arguably the biggest winner of Open when you compare her to Graded. Every time there is a Mile CM, you are going to take Daitaku Helios. If you don't own Daitaku Helios, find someone that you could borrow it from. It's an extremely powerful card this CM. What does it do? Well, it gives you mild corners, which, while not always super efficient, do give you 3 seconds of 15% speed. And it turns out they are cheaper than other similar velocity speed skills that we're going to cover later. So for now, keep in mind, this is a good skill. And speaking of good skills, hello, my goat. This is secretly a gold skill, right? You've probably heard your graded people talk about Speed Eater. And in graded, this is a nice skill to have. This is a required frontrunner skill in open. Every frontrunner should have this. If your frontrunner does not have this, figure it the fuck out. All right, you will absolutely lose your CMs routinely if you don't have Speed Eater and someone else who is running a frontrunner does. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're not running a frontrunner, don't bother with this. You do need to be first, second, third, which is a little tough without lucky pace. All right, and unfortunately, frontrunners are quite good this CM because of things like Speed Eater. Now you might go, okay, well, what makes Speed Eater so good is both a speed increase and a speed decrease at the same time, meaning the net speed value is roughly speaking 30% across the different UMA, which means for less than half the cost, it gives 90 something percent of the value of Professor of Curvature, which is a 508 point skill. All right, like, this is an incredible skill for all of your frontrunners, and of course, it's on Daitaku Helios, who gives you a bunch of really helpful skills, like mild corners and shifting gears. You love to see this Uma. You love to see this girl on your timeline every time she shows up. One of the best cards to click on that red exclamation point for every time you see her in your support pool. Now, for our late searchers, we do have. It's not all doom and gloom. Updrafters is actually a pretty cool skill, and it turns out you can get updrafters from multiple helpful sources, namely Nishino Flower and vodka. Vodka, of course, gives you Tokyo Racehorse, which is quite nice, and Nishino Flower, of course, gives you firm conditions. And I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. Nishino Flower, in particular, is actually kind of interesting because there's 3 different ways that you can take advantage of the skills that she offers you, but for different stats, right? If you need wit because you're having trouble making your wit up, find Nishino wit. If you own speed Nishino or power Nishino, you can use them and they will help you fill out your stat block, right? That just kind of means that Nishino Flower is actually a pretty good card this CM in a way that she's just not as good in graded, right? Isn't that cool? You're gonna hear this all the time, by the way. All right, you're gonna hear all the time about how like cards that just don't function in graded are suddenly really, really good open cards. This is most cards in the game, by the way. Now, you're going to hear me talk a lot about Monosensi because of things like Productive Plan. Productive Plan is the last of the 3 second speed boosts that we can get that are 15%. And like every other 3 second speed boost, it's 239 or worse. Now, unlike Mild Corners, it can't be upgraded, one. And two, unlike Mild Corners, it's locked to the front 5 UMA in any given CM. So if there's a UMA with 9, if there's a CM, there's 9 UMA. Out of those 9 UMA, 5 of them can proc Productive Plan. These need to be the first 5. And it turns out there's only really 2 good sources for that. That's Taiki Shuttle and Madozensky, which means most of the time you'll probably run Madozensky. That's because she has a good training effectiveness without being explosively good. You'll notice I didn't say Biko Pegasus. Well, Biko Pegasus actually has a problem that's unique to Open. You just heard me glaze a lot of cards as being way better in Open than in Graded. Well, Biko is kind of the opposite. Biko is such a powerful card that sometimes she's just too good for Open. It turns out 20% training effectiveness is a really strong number that means that you sometimes just have too much stats without meaning to, right? Biko Pegasus has a nasty habit of making your stats explode in number and go over the threshold without her meaning to, and so that makes it so she's a little tough to recommend sometimes. And she's not the only card that's like that, but she's definitely the most notable because she is the one who has the biggest habit of showing up on not speed training, which means she has the biggest habit of being somewhere where it's kind of unhelpful for her to be. Versus Monosensi, who just at 10%, 10% is a comfortable number. You're going to slide in quite easily into a nice stat. She also has a specialty priority, which Taiki Shuttle does not have. And so, even though Taiki Shuttle and Monosensi share a lot of the same abilities, I'll mostly recommend Monosensi over Taiki Shuttle whenever they show up. Hey, hello again, my goat. Speaking of which, Monosensi and Taiki Shuttle, you also see this thing called Shifting Gears. It's a 2.4% second skill, but it still gets 15% speed, so it's still good, right? Unyielding Spirit is one of those cards that, like, it's everywhere. Or, not cards, skills. It's a skill that's everywhere. And just kind of like with Nishio Flower, you can kind of take your flavor of whatever's helpful for you. There are speed cards that give it, there are guts cards, and there are wits cards. Take what flavor you want. All right, they're all fine. They're all reasonable. Uh, it's also another one of those cards that like are stills. 239 cost, 15% speed, 2.4 seconds. It is what it is. Now let's talk about things I don't want to see. All right, so things that like okay, you know what? No, 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 no. I love seeing Dominator. You know why? Dominator does not work on medium tracks. Who could have known? And it's not the only one. There's a lot of skills that do not work on mediums, do not work in sprints, and do not work in longs. Or rather, only work on mediums, only work on sprints, and only work on longs. AKA, they don't work on mile. Why is that important? Well, uh, guys, it turns out some misinformation was spread. Like, I want to say, like in the first couple months of Uma, some people got under the impression that if your wit is high enough, you can proc skills even if they don't normally proc here. I think the way this happened is because some people knew about Summer Gold Chip and they thought she would be in the game a lot faster, and so they just kind of assumed, well, if I just play Summer Gold Chip, no, she's not in the game yet. So because she's not in the game yet, you can't do things like take Dominator on your random Uma. It does not work. I'm sorry. So this still just doesn't function. But I will let you know now, I love seeing you in my CMs. I love seeing you people who take skills that just don't function at all because you are free wins, and I love my free wins. So thank you very much. Stop doing it. But if you do, I appreciate you. Uh, we also need to talk a little bit about some skills that like should be good, but just kind of aren't, right? Unrestrained and Corner Connoisseur are really, really high notable here, where Unrestrained can proc anywhere on that final corner, which you'll notice is kind of big. Uh, and the same is true of Corner Connoisseur, where it could be good, but it's not. Because, well, there's too many places where it's helpful, where it's unhelpful for it to proc. So, it is what it is. I mean, if you want to gamble on it, you can. I'm not going to stop you, right? Like, they're fine. Like, if you have spare points, it's okay, right? But arguably, there are better accelerations that we've already covered, right? Uh, like the ones you can get from an RE1, Highlander, any of the inherited skills, right? So these are very, very like touch and go, especially for like front runners, where like front runners are basically always taking alien steaming. Unrestrained is not alien steaming. You'd rather just take alien steaming instead. You'll also notice that no stopping me is here. We're gonna catch up to this pretty soon. But it turns out you don't really want to run Unity Cup in open. Again, why? We'll talk about later. But the actual skill is completely fine. No stopping me will proc sometimes. It's not consistent. The UMA spread out a lot this CM, just kind of like they did last CM, so it's not unlikely that you just won't hit no stopping me. But sometimes you will, and it will feel really good. So don't feel bad about taking it. But because you're not running Unity Cup, you can really only get this from Yukino Bijin Wit. Most of you probably don't have Yukino Bijin Wit. In part because if you ever want No Stopping Me, you probably just run Unity Cup. So you probably saw this as really low priority to pull on. So a lot of you just don't have it. So even though the skill itself is good, for reasons that are outside of No Stopping Me's control, you probably won't see it too often unless it's on me on the top gun. Now let's talk about skills that do work. All right, things that I love to see and I would love to see you take. Keen Eye. You might go, what, huh? Why do I need a blue recovery skill on a mile CM? Well, because this is not just a recovery skill, and that's not the part that we take this for. It's also a all enemy girls ahead of you speed debuff skill at the late part of the early race or the right at the start of the mid race. It's quite good. It turns out nerfing people in the middle of the race by 20% is a really, really big speed debuff that makes them fall behind fairly significantly. It's a pretty, pretty rough current speed debuff, okay? If you're running front runners in particular, it lets your front runners get ahead. If you're running late surges and in closers, it helps them fight for position and be in stronger positions before the start of the late race. So that way, even if Furious Feet or on your left proc a little bit late, they still have good timings, right? So this means Keen Eye is actually a very, very goaded skill for one of your Uma to have. And if you're a real psychopath, you can take it on 3 Uma, and you can really make someone cry, okay? Oh, it's a travesty, alright? You can inflict so much pain on enemy frontrunners, okay? And bear in mind, again, frontrunners are very strong in the CM because Alien Steamy is strong, Speed Eater is such a strong skill that you'll take Keen Eye just to help counteract some of the downsides of being hit by Speed Eater. That being said, if you're a real psycho, you can do a chariot build where you have two front runners and then a late surger or an end closer, and just absolutely destroy someone's soul by taking two speed eater procs and a kenai proc, and they're just gone. And it's gonna be really, really funny when it happens. I have to apologize to everyone that it happens to, because it's definitely my fault that I suggested it to them. Speaking of Furious Feet, and on your left, they're good for the CM, technically. Like, hey, they're 40% acceleration skills, which, hey, 40% acceleration skills, pretty good still, it turns out. Um, Now, they're not consistent. They can proc too late, it happens all the time, and so if you take one of them, you probably want to be taking both of them. Which means you probably want to be having Nice Nature on your deck sometimes, which means you're gonna sometimes overstat a little bit. Because Nice Nature is kind of in that she gives you too many stats sometimes category. A Dory Cap is not, though. A Dory Cap is a great source of Furious Feet. You're going to be happy to have a Dory Cap, and not Grass Wonder. Now, Grass Wonder, I love her to death, but the card itself is unfortunately not very good. One, it's a Guts card, and again, if you're not Guts maxing, you don't want Guts cards. And two, it doesn't give you reliable Furious Feet. You play open to be reliable, right? You're playing open because you don't want to constantly circle the drain, hoping for a better and better Uma, right? And so anything that's not reliable, you don't want. And Furious Feet is something you don't want because, here's a hint, it's not reliable. It is what it is. Um, Speaking of reliable, hey, I mentioned Highlander earlier. Again, I need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Even for your late surgers, I can sometimes recommend Highlander if you don't take Furious Feet and on your left, or if even if you just take the white version, Six Surge and Updrafters, right? It's not unreasonable to take Highlander. That gives you another way to proc, a backup plan in case something goes wrong, or in case your mama excels don't proc properly. Okay, so do what you gotta do. Now there are of course velocity golds, and I do love velocity golds, and I love seeing velocity golds on other people. The reason I love seeing velocity golds on other people is because in open they're expensive, and so while they do provide fairly significant speed boosts, they also represent a fairly major opportunity cost. Roughly speaking, the way you can look at it, a lot of white skills will give you 15% speed bonus, right? So if you take two white skills, that's 30% speed bonus for cheaper than what a gold skill will give you, right? At 35% is what most of them will give you. Does that make them bad? No, I do think taking one is good. But a good rule of thumb is that if you take one gold skill, only ever take a second, never take a third. Right? Your stats are going to start to suffer if you start taking three or four gold skills. This is not graded. You do have a cap, and you need to be mindful of that cap. So even though there are a lot of skills that are good, be careful with them. Okay. Uh, but they're not bad. Like they're perfectly reasonable. I will not look down on you if you do take those. They're perfectly reasonable takes to take. Okay. Now, there are some that will be goaded, but unfortunately, there's no sharing involved, because Uma won't let us have nice things. Frickin' side games, motherfuckers. You can't have Mile Maven, you can't have Big Sisterly, you can't have Changing Gears, you can't have Leave a Charge, you can't have Encroaching Shadow. Those are you locked in on specific Uma, and only specific Uma can get them. And now I can hear you. I hear your butt in the back saying, wait, 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 wait. What do you mean Mile Maven? I can get Mile Maven. I just play Unity Cup. If I play Unity Cup and take the Taiki Shuttle card, I can absolutely take Malmaven. Isn't that fun? Isn't that cool? Well, there's a problem, Malmaven. You're playing Unity Cup. Again, I need to make sure I make this as clear as I can for everyone. Do not play Unity Cup if you are trying to play open. Now you might go, why? Uh, it's your reds. Specifically, your red exclamation points. You're gonna miss them. You don't have them really in Unity Cup. In Unity Cup, your red exclamation points are frequently hidden by fireballs. Because they are hidden, you won't always know if there's actually a skill under that fireball or not. You're gonna find out the hard way by not getting the skill. It happens all the time. On top of that, Unity Cup also runs into a secondary issue that you might not think about normally, and that problem is that, oh no, I can't take that training anymore because it gives me too much stats. This is a thing that will happen in open sometimes, where there's a good training that just gives too much, right? It makes your stats go over, it makes your stamina go too high, your power, speed, whatever, all right? And when that happens, when your stats get too high, okay, like, it's a tragedy. And frankly, it happens more in Unity Cup. Unity Cup has a nasty habit of giving you too many stats when you don't want them. And because of that, you do fewer trainings. Because you do fewer trainings, you get fewer reds. Fewer reds means fewer of the skills that you went out of your way to hunt down. So please don't do unique up. Now, moving on. Base stat line. This is a reasonable stat line for a red shift Monozenski, okay? With who is level 4 with a level 3 unique. You'll notice that's not level 5. Yes, if you've never done open before, I do recommend that you go out of your way to limit yourself at least a little bit, okay? You do not want to have a very high level unique skill. The reason being is that having a high level unique is mostly something you do for team trials, right? It helps improve your store. There is a slight effect on the value of the skill, but really the difference in points value between a level 3 unique and a level 4 unique is about 180 points, but the difference in improvement is like the 1 to 5% improvement. It's not worth it. Don't do it. All right. 5% is not worth 180 points on any skill, which is why we have the stat line here. This stat line is one that wins. It finishes. It can get there, right? You'll notice you have 64 HP remaining at the very end of the CM. All right, so 500 for a front runner is reasonable. This means that for most other positionals, 500 can be a little bit much. Like for late surgers and end closers, they don't need 500. You can probably stand out at like 475, 480, 450, right? Somewhere in that range, right? It's probably completely okay. And of course, pace chasers want more. Pace chasers probably want like 550, 560, somewhere in that range. Now, it is notable, in this CM, there is a stat boost for being for each 300 in speed and each 300 in stamina, you get a small speed boost. In From previous experience in CMs, that speed boost does matter, but uh, not by enough to justify the extra stats cap that will be hit if you try and go for 600 stamina. Now, is it always bad? No, I don't think it's always bad. I think sometimes it's totally fine, right? But you definitely pick and choose your battle here, right? You're probably completely fine dropping some stamina to be at 500 instead of 600. 600 is honestly more than you need, and that means that it's a little iffy to take. That being said, if there is some psycho out there that runs a stamina debuffer, then heck, you're okay with running 600 stamina, right? It'll keep you safe. It also prevents you from like being rushed. Like if you get rushed in a CM, then obviously you're gonna burn through some more stamina, and that will pretty suck. So having extra stamina is okay for that purpose. Now, which way, Western Man? Okay, no one knows. All right, so there is a tug of war that happens in every open CM where you have people who go hard in on skills, and you have people that go hard in on stats. And which one is correct is completely up to the gods of fate. Okay, like sometimes all those skills will put in work, and you're going to win. Other times, those stat numbers were really big, and you're gonna win. For the most part, what I found is that the longer the CM is, the more you just want raw stats. The reason being is that skills only make up 2 to 4 seconds of any given activation, right? Which means out of any like CM, only 2 to 4 seconds of them are impacted by that skill. So there's like small horse links that they give you to help catch up, pass somebody, win the CM, etc., etc. Uh, this tends to mean that in open, where you have a cap on how fast you can go, because you really aren't hitting that 1,200 speed, uh, sometimes it still is helpful, but it's not always helpful. And which ratio you hit with varies. I've absolutely lost a CM, not a CM like a CM, but like lost a race or two to like someone who scanned out on skills and just went maximum stats. And I've absolutely lost to the reverse. All right. What level of tug of war you want to hit is ultimately up to you. If I had the recommendation, I would recommend a slightly higher skill floor here, just because this is a mile CM and like you just don't have a lot of time to catch up if you fall behind. But I wouldn't blame you for like maxing stats instead and just taking no skills. Now, here's a couple example stat lines, right? Oh, right. Yep. I should explain. The other reason I recommend this stat line is because there's room for skills, and I do think that skills are going to be important to CM. You could crank these numbers up a lot higher if you just said, "Nah, I don't want skills." It's completely possible. Okay. So speaking of example, so no change to the stat line. Drop like 50 guts. Like who cares? It's 50 guts. We don't care at all, right? That nets you a pretty solid little Uma, right? You can get Malmaven, you can get Victoria Paplancha, View from Lee's Mine, or more accurately, Angling and Scheming, probably, right? Angling and Scheming is the exact same cost as View from the Lead or Victoria from Plancha, they're the same cost. So, this is a winning Numa. This is a Numa that, like, does perfectly fine. She does great, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with her, right? She'll do good. Now, this one. This one is short a couple hundred, and by a couple hundred, I mean 98 points. Being short by 98 points is not great. But does she work? Yes. Would I judge you for using this? No. This is still a pretty powerful Uma. This is still an Uma that like will probably win at least some of the races, and does have a few more skills. Now, if we were to really push this and go into the crazy territory, we can get if we drop some speed and drop some stamina and drop some guts and drop some power and drop some wit, you can take in a ton of skills. Would I do this? Well, I would say no, but I did test it and it did work. It did win the one test race I tried it on, and then no other race after that. But hey, it is possible. And frankly, if this is like the stat line you want to hit, I think it's reasonable. I don't see any problem with it per se. It's very possible to win with this. Is it tight? Yeah, a little bit. In particular, the stamina and guts are kind of low, so don't be too surprised if you guess out. But it is possible to win with something like this, so keep that in mind. Sometimes you just high roll on stamina consumption, you're just fine. Speaking of high rolling, there is a monster in the room that we gotta talk about, and that is which Uma can you even use in the first place? Okay, so, this is a dirt CM. And not only is it a dirt CM, it's a dirt mile CM. So, what I've done for you is taken the liberty of helping your sanity out and limited the number of Uma that have both a dirt E or better and a mile E or better. Uh, you'll notice the list is pretty short. uh, it turns out there's just not a lot of ways to be both good at dirt and at mile and still have a very powerful Uma, right? Are there strong Uma that don't have these affinities, that have like dirt G or something? Well, yeah, kinda. But look at this chart over here to the right, all right? This chart's very important for you to understand. You see this chart here? This chart explains how easy it is to get from starting grade whatever to whatever grade you actually want, right? And what the cap is. You can't get above this at start of your run. You have to hope for a spark for S for most of these. So starting at E, uh, 10 sparks, in other words, 2 mamas worth of sparks, or a 1-9 spark mama plus a lucky pink in the middle of your run will get you A. Lucky pink to A is never great. Again, you're playing open Uma for consistency. You're playing open Uma to save on your sanity. So going out of your way to use multiple E's on the same or worse on the same Uma makes your life hell. And it means that you need to figure out some way to get multiple things true at the same time. Multiple things being, well, if you run Opera O, for example, the best you can hope for off of 2 parents is Mile B, Dirt B. And now you need to hope for a separate pink spark for A, and A in Dirt, and another separate pink spark for A in Mile, and another one for the S. Don't do this, please. Please just don't do this, alright? Save your sanity. Because, like, to me, part of why I play open is because I saw from very early on that like if I just blitzed runs as often as I could all the time with no recourse, I was gonna burn out, and a lot of people have burnt out. They treat this game like a job and not a game, and I don't want that for you. Okay, I want you to be able to enjoy yourself. Now there are some characters that are borderline okay. That being the ones I've shown in front of you, where they have 1G, and getting Dirt B is okay. Not good, not great, but functional. So Dirt E is enough, right? That you can sometimes consider trying to hit. In particular, I do want to shout out Fuji Kuseki and Akabono and Mayana Top Gun. Okay, these three in particular have F, F, or E's at worst, and so they are possible. But again, I really do recommend you just run these other Uma instead. Okay. Now, speaking of Uma, like I said, I'm not going to do a true tier list, but I'm going to give you like a sort of like rough power level list. Ultimately, because there's a hard cap of 8,200, your Uma can only get so strong, right? There is definitely a cap on what you're capable of. So to give you an idea of what I think the cap looks like, I'm giving you some thick thighs or some thin thighs, all right, to help you all picture what the good Uma look like. Agnes Digital and Smart Falcon, thick thighs. Haru Ulala, well, thin thighs. Bearing in mind, of course, that there's a way to get around this, but we're gonna talk about that later. Next up, we have El Condor Pasa, El Condor Pasa Isekai, Teki Shuttle, and a Guri Cap, and Chris is a Guri Cap. Regular Guri, Taiki Shuttle, and then the two El Condor Pasas, they're quite strong this CM. Uh, hey D3 Damage, why do you say Aguri Cap, one of the famously powerful Umas, the Christmas Aguri Cap, the literal meta Uma in graded is, not great down in open? Um, we're gonna talk more about that later, but suffice to say, Aguri Cap is a little bit on fraud watch this CM. Speaking of fraud watch, Summer Motozinski, I was tempted to give her thicker thighs. Summer Motozinski has Speed Eater and Malmaven baked in. She's going to rock your CM. If you see one and they have Speed Eater and Malmaven, you are in for a rough time. Uh, but the rest of these, Hishi Amazon, Gold City, also quite strong. Gold City regular in particular has she has Keen Eye and On Your Left built in. She's a fairly strong Mile Uma. This CM, so definitely watch out for any random Gold Cities you see. They can rock your shit. Uh, now you might notice I didn't present thighs at all for regular Motozenski. Well, that's because her power level's kind of weird. One, frontrunners are just strong this CM. Because frontrunners are strong this CM, Motozenski is strong. But her ult is kind of bad. And again, being efficient is part for the course of being an open. So, her being inefficient is kind of not great. Unless you figure out how to make her, I don't know, it's hypothetically, if you could delay the activation so that her ult actually procs late race, huh, I wonder if you could make her an encloser or a laser or something. Hmm. Now, to me, we'll talk more about that later, okay? Don't worry about that for now. Because we do want to talk about some weird nonsense you're able to begin with, right? Like, I feel like that's a pretty natural segue into some of the weird, stupid, gorgeous stuff, right? The stuff that, like, makes me look at you and think, what a Chad, alright? The stuff that, like, will make Haru Ulala fight for you, right? So let's start with Haru Ulala. More specifically, Squad Wipe Haru. So, it turns out the only natural debuff for this CM is Gold City. And if you're not Gold City, you don't have access to King Eye without having to use a Gold City card. Uh, and it turns out there is one particular person that already has a recovery unique that you really don't expect to win. Haru Regular. Haru Regular is probably one of the only Uma that you have that can be guaranteed. You're gonna see like 3 Haru this CM. Guaranteed. It's gonna happen at least one lobby. It's gonna be triple Haru, okay? But the thing is, she's not really built to win. She doesn't have a good velocity unique. She doesn't have good access to acceleration stills, which means you have to put everything onto her. And in graded, that's not actually that big a deal. In graded, fuck it, we ball, right? In graded, you can just throw so many skills onto her that she's gonna win anyways, at least some of the time. But in open, there's a cap, which means it's her inefficiency is kind of a big deal. Unless she's hypothetically, unless she happens to be some kind of squad wipe Haru that has a bunch of debuffs. And it turns out Haru in particular is very well positioned to make use of this, right? She already has End Closer B. That is actually very important for making her very good at this process, right? End Closer B means you don't need to take a single End Closer Spark. She's functional. You don't need her to win if she's your debuffer. You just need her to not die. Alright, and to be in a good position at the time to proc this. And it turns out, in 10 days, that's pretty good. And Kinai, that's a lot. It's pretty good. It's a lot of speed debuffs on one Uma. And because she's an end closer and she's hotter and she doesn't have a lot of good velocities, she's gonna be in the back of the pack, meaning you're probably gonna explode and hit a lot of people when you Kinai / intense days. Meaning your other Uma, your actual aces are going to have a much, much easier time winning if you deign to bring the squad wipe Haru. Now, some of you might not know the best way is to sneak in debuffers onto your Uma, because in graded, it's not really a thing. In graded, like, you can only get so fast, right? Like, or rather, okay, I'll rephrase that. In graded, everyone's at speed cap with gold excels. You're not gonna stop somebody. In open, not so much. So in open, you take some cards that like you probably wouldn't normally take, like Yeno Muteki. Yeno Muteki in graded is just a grandparent card or a parent card, right? But in open, she's real. In particular, The very first spark on her chain, the very first event, gives you hesitant late surges guaranteed. Easiest way to get hesitant lates possible. And again, we've mentioned some very powerful late surges, notably Gold City Festival. A Gory Cap can be a very good late surge of the CM, right? Now, are late surges good? They're kind of gambly, but you will sometimes be very grateful that you have this, okay? It'll make your life a lot simpler, at least some of the time. Now, the real meat and potatoes is going to be hesitant front and hesitant pace. Why? Well, pace chasers are easy to build the CM, and front runners are easy to build the CM. So it turns out that there's going to be a lot of them. So having hesitant pace, hesitant front is quite strong this CM. Again, remember, El Condor Pasta is a thing, and she's going to be very good this CM. So having both of her ideal positions be targeted by a debuff is really good. And that means Marvelous Sunday is really good, because she is the only card that gives you both hesitant pace and has it in front. And she happens to have a wit variant, which means, hey, debuffers love a high wit, right? They love taking more wit than they normally need. So that makes, uh, in particular, the Wit Marvelous Sunday a goaded open card. Uh, and now about has an end. I don't know how many end closes you're gonna see. All right, now you're gonna have people like me who are psychopaths and love Golshi and will seriously consider running Golshi on the mild dirt CM. All right. In fact, I think if I go onto YouTube right now, I'll find one guy crashing out about how he does or does not hit the Golshi A for dirt every now and then. All right. Uh, so psychos exist because I love this Uma. And because they love this Uma, you could reasonably consider taking Hessen end closers. It is also worth noting that, again, Guri Cap can be a very powerful end closer. Moyano Top Gun can be an end closer. Amazon can be an end closer. But here's what you gotta notice about everyone that I said. Everyone that I listed is a 3-star Uma. Uh, that means it's gonna be kind of tough to even see one, right? So it's kind of rough to tell you to take hesitant end closers when you straight up might not see an end closer the entire CM, right? The odds are not zero. So if you hate end closers, then heck yeah, take it. Glory to you, my queen. But air groove. But otherwise, do what you gotta do. Now, other weird stuff that you can do. We're gonna move on from the debuffing stuff. Double front domination with Taiki Shuttle and El Condor Pasa. Now, this is very specific to certain people. Not everyone can do this, okay? Not everyone has the very specific suite of Uma that it takes to give both of your people everything they need for this, alright? It's gonna be hard. But, at the same time, Taiki has changing gears of Malmaven, meaning she has a really easy time just saying, but what if I'm in front, though? All right. And it turns out, even if you don't quite hit it, you like being at third place as or fourth place as late as possible on the final corner. Uh, it does happen sometimes where someone procs Professor of Curvature and passes you up as really deep into the late race on this thing, or into the mid race on this thing. I mean, they can pass you right when you hit third, meaning you can get your ult out of nowhere on Taiki Soul sometimes as a front runner. And it's very, very funny. Also, El Condor Pasa's ult is one of the best accelerations in the CM. It's a 30% excel. 30% excel is better than 20% excel, right? It's quite good. But only when she uses it herself. As an inherited skill, it's not that great. And she has to be in first or second place, which means that as a pace chaser, well, it's not that great. But hypothetically, if you made her a frontrunner, even frontrunner B, it could be really good. And you're gonna feel really good when it happens, right? It's quite strong. So, because they happen to synergize so well with first, second, third, fourth being the lineup that they want, they're actually a really reliable pair. And if you do pair them off, it's very funny. Now, speaking of funny things you can do, I do have a small fraud alert for you. Christmas Aguri has not been good yet in any of the CMs since she came out. Not through any fault of her own, but just because of the weird nature of her kit. She really, 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 really wants to proc three blue recoveries, right? Rather, three recoveries. So because she wants to proc three recoveries, uh, she really likes medium and long CMs. We haven't had one since she's come out. Not really. Like, she was kind of there for one, but not really. Where does that leave us at? Well, that leaves us in this weird position where for the Mal CM, she's probably to be overstated if we're not careful, or have way too much down, way, way more than she needs. Um, So if you do find one, or you do have one, and you want to build her, your build looks completely different from everyone else's. Again, in part because like you have more than one thing to look out for, right? Uh, as a front runner, she's slightly better because there is a moxie on front runners, which means about 33 meters into the late race you can proc moxie, which means 33 meters in you can proc your ult. But if you're doing that, you're not accelerating early on because you don't have a lot of stamina, so you might just not have enough stamina to enter your final spurt and to enter your acceleration mode in the first place, which it makes running a Dory cap and open really tough. Because again, you gotta remember, like this stuff is kind of expensive, right? Like just by running the the recoveries that you need and a stat line that can proc those recoveries, you're probably missing out on some other stuff. And frankly, I don't even know how you get this stat line. I'm pretty sure a more realistic stat line drops the power for, I guess, more guts is probably cheaper and more efficient. Probably, yeah, and like that's a tough sell. I don't know that I can recommend her for you to see him. But if you do love Christmas and Curry and you follow the hype and you happen to have her, well, it's possible. Just be aware that you're in for a bit of an uphill climb. And again, to me, part of the reason of open is to not do uphill climbs. So, all right. Now for an uphill climb that's near and dear to my heart. All right, I'm not gonna lie to you. I love running end closer mod intensity and late surge mod intensity. It is some of the most fun, most hype shit you will ever do. Okay, because it just works. All right, it is incredibly strong if it procs correctly. Where you proc right at the end of the mid race or right at the start of the late race, you are gone. You are gone, and no one can catch up with you. No one else will have this reliable a 40% acceleration still. Most of them are going to be gambling on your left, gambling on Furious Feet, gambling on Highlander. Right? Not you. You're gone, but it does require you have two sets of really strong parents. You need 10 sparks to get into C, or you need 9 sparks and a lucky D, a lucky proc to get N equals to C, and then you need to hit Dirt A from Dirt D. That means on Turf, this is super easy to do, because on Turf, you don't need to do anything on Mile CMs. On Turf, you can just say, well, fuck it, we ball, right? And just say, let's just get her, get her stats up. Get the end closers up to C. Not a problem at all. Unfortunately for a dirt CM, it's a little bit tougher, right? You need to fix her dirt spark primarily, right? So you need to get to dirt A at least, if possible. Uh, so I don't recommend it. Again, this is very funny, very haha, lol, 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 but it is possible. I just want to make sure I put it on your radar because it is very strong. What's my conclusion here? In conclusion, I find Open very fun. It is a time to fix your Chinko Uma. You get to use a lot of cards that you just don't normally get to use. Please eat your greens. Pick your poison of Highlander and or Inherit Accelerations. Save yourself some heartache. Don't do most Uma. Most Uma need too much work to be able to be functional. Please, for your sanity, choose Dirt D and Mal C or better. Stats are precious. Please calculate routinely. May your El Condor Pasta win, and may your Haru break knees. Later. Good luck.